An American boy accidentally fell into the water and drowned to save his aunt. But 32 years later, Mike miraculously woke up in a rice paddy in China. He walked out of the paddy field in great confusion. He didn't know why he was here, just walking to the market. A kind Chinese woman saw him very lost and came up to him and asked, "What's wrong with you?" The man next to him said he was willing to give the boy a hand. Mike was excited by the sudden concern. When he asked Mike where his mom and dad were, but faced with the unfamiliar environment and accent, Mike couldn't remember anything. Then he fainted. Finally, with the help of the police, they contacted the U.S. Embassy. Mike was repatriated to his home country, but the problem was, the boy had neither a passport nor an ID card. So where did he come from, and where was he going to be sent? The police speculated that it was most likely kidnapping or child trafficking, but they checked all the major U.S. states. There are no recent cases of missing persons. This can make the case in charge of the agent John very suspicious. Mike seemed traumatized and refused to say anything. The only clue is that the boy's shirt with ACAB written on it may be his name. With Agent John's patience, Mike writes Arcadia on his phone. Agent John thought that would be Mike's hometown. He immediately contacted the sheriff of the local police department, but the other side said there was no such person. There was no missing child named ACAB in the precinct either. Agent John was very puzzled. He looked at Mike in amazement, so he dialed the phone number of the children's home and decided to send the boy away. But the boy insisted that he had parents and a home. The agent looked at the boy's sincere eyes and decided to drive him home. When he arrived at Arcadia, he asked Mike to show him the way. Mike listened and nodded his head with a long-awaited smile on his face. John started the car and set off. They finally arrived at their destination after a long journey. At Mike's signal, John parked the car in front of a family's house. He parked the car and then went to ring the doorbell. The door was opened by an old man.
Father Jacob,
What's this about?
did your son go missing, sir?
Mine.
I have him. He's okay.
My son died 32 years ago.
Agent John suddenly showed an expression of surprise. Apparently, he must have been looking in the wrong place. He said sorry and intended to leave. But at that moment, ACAB, who was hiding, suddenly ran up the steps, shouting for his father and jumping into the old man's arms. The father thought he was hallucinating in his old age. How could this be? John was completely baffled. What the hell is going on here? At that moment, the man's wife heard the sound and came out. The moment she saw her son ACAB, she was instantly stunned. She could not have imagined that her son, who had been dead for 32 years, would suddenly appear. She took a few steps back and softly chanted her son's name, ACAB. She then brought her son inside while George was at the door to tell Agent John about his son's drowning at the river when he was 8 years old. He refused to believe that his son, who had been dead for 32 years, could come back to life. But ACAB was exactly the same as when he drowned, and even wearing his clothes exactly as when he disappeared. The mother slowly knelt down and stretched out her hand to touch her son's cheek. She looked at her son carefully. I did not expect that the 8-year-old son had not changed at all, but she had become incredibly old. They both looked more like grandchildren. The mother was very happy to have her son back, but the father looked very sad. The sudden resurrection of a man who had been dead for 32 years was a blessing or a curse for the family. Is ACAB really their son? His sudden resurrection after 32 years of death was a shock to his parents. No one knows what this means. Just as the police questioned it, John came across a photo from 32 years ago. He took out his phone and snapped a picture. Not long after, the sheriff of ACAB heard the news and came immediately, unaware of the truth. He scolded at John. Why to say his son is still alive, which will make him very sad. The brother hurriedly went up to dissuade him. At that moment, ACAB suddenly appeared and greeted the uncle warmly. The uncle frowned in his tracks. Fortunately, it was daytime. If it was nighttime, it would be very scary. He was just about to go up to confirm that it was not a ghost when ACAB suddenly fell down and had a full-body convulsion. John rushed to pick up the boy and took him to the local hospital and got a female doctor and instructed her to check carefully if the boy had been abused. When the doctor took a stethoscope in ACAB's chest, she found that she could not hear any sound. The doctor thought the stethoscope was malfunctioning, so she picked it up and tapped the heartbeat a few times before it became clear. She put the stethoscope to ACAB's chest again to check, and only then did she hear the heartbeat. Outside the door, Agent John was on the phone with his female supervisor. The female supervisor learned that the boy's parents were in their 60s and suggested that they get a DNA test. If the results don't match, Jacob must be brought back. Handing up the phone, John arranges for a doctor to perform a DNA test on them. At night, Jacob stands in front of the window, staring expressionlessly at the light outside. Before the test results come back, Jacob suddenly and mysteriously disappears. The police and the father searched for a long time and finally found the child in the woods. But Jacob saw his father and ran towards the woods. John was afraid that his son would have another accident, so he chased after him. He kept flashing back to the warm images of his youth when he was playing with his son. This happy time was very nostalgic to him. However, more than 30 years have passed. He is really old, and his physical strength is obviously not enough. Jacob ran to a hole in the tree and stopped to throw out the toy he had hidden here. This is exactly what his father gave him back then. Despite the many years that have passed since his son came back from the dead, Jacob still seems to be the same boy as before, naive and innocent. The mother treats him like a baby, and she would give anything, including her life, if only her son could return to her side. But John always remained sober and rational, and he always felt that Jacob was strange. He felt a hint of weirdness in his son, especially the surge in diet, much like a very hungry ghost. It was amazing that he could eat the amount of several grown men in one meal. But the mother did not care so much. She deliberately ignored this perverse behavior. John, in order to find out the truth of the matter, he asked Jacob to recall the previous memories. Jacob vaguely remembered that he was trying to save his aunt, but a foot slipped and fell into the river, and the swift water washed him away directly. Instead, his aunt was caught by a man on the bank. When he woke up, he somehow appeared in a Chinese rice paddy. But John is very suspicious of this. He always felt that the Jacob who returned was not his son. He had buried his son with his own hands, and the tombstone was still there. In order to find out the truth, Agent John came up with a bold idea. This is both he has been dead and 32 years later and returned to life. Then they came to Mike's tombstone ready to open the coffin to see if the body is still inside. But when they opened the coffin at the moment, they were very shocked, because the coffin of the boy Jacob, the bones are still there. John was instantly blinded. The clothes on the body and Jacob now were exactly the same. If the boy lying in the coffin was Jacob, then who was the boy at home? John deliberately cut off a piece of collar to compare, except for the newness of the old, but the exact same. What the hell is going on here? This does not make sense at all. At that moment, the boy Jacob came up and asked John if he was lying in the coffin. John was worried about scaring the boy and deliberately lied to him, and complimented Mike on his great ball skills. The next day, the mother took her son Jacob to the field to play soccer. They had a great time, but after a while, other parents called their children away. In their opinion, Jacob has become a long-dead ghost, and it seems that the boy's resurrection from the dead has disturbed the town's residents. Late at night, the town's children shine a flashlight through Jacob's window. Jacob is frightened and has another seizure. John could not stand it, and immediately rushed out of his room to drive the children away. But within days of the boy's resurrection, there is a second man back from the dead. He died of a heart attack 13 years ago, and his body has been cremated. A black altar stood there, but the man pointed to her and told his daughter Anna that it was not him. Seeing her father, Anna can only believe his words, but the brother suspects that this father is a fake. Now, two people have come back from the dead. Agent John's desire to find out the answer grew stronger. So, the next day, in the company of a female doctor, they found the river where Jacob fell into the water. The female doctor told John that her mother had drowned with Jacob, and she had tried to find the truth, but it was all in vain. After the resurrection of the man, only a few days after the resurrection, to carry a hoe to the woods to dig up the soil with a marker. The original, come 13 years ago, he robbed a money truck with his accomplice. He buried all the money in the woods. He just buried it well due to too much excitement led to a sudden heart attack and died. Now, after resurrection, the man only wanted to find the money back to his children, but he dug for half a day but there was nothing. He suspected that his accomplice had taken the money. The man was so angry that he came to the Potter's house with a hammer to ask where the money was. The accomplice wanted the money, but not his life. The man killed his accomplice in anger, and then robbed the money truck again using the same modus operandi as 13 years ago. He wanted to leave the money to his beloved daughter, but now there is surveillance everywhere, and before he can give the money to his daughter, he is already surrounded by police. The daughter also lost her job because of her father's crime. She runs to the prison to fight with her father. The man becomes more violent because of his daughter's lack of understanding. John came to the prison to find some clues from the man, but the moment John turned to pour water, the man who came back from the dead disappeared. He investigated the surveillance and could not find any clues. So will Mike, who came back from the dead, disappear with him?